Welcome to a show dedicated to things out of this world. And what's out of this world is the story about Untitled Airlines, the airline you may have never heard about. What started as one man's hobby in a small town garage and became one of the biggest airlines in the country, seemingly overnight, only to disappear all within 10 years. A company with soaring profits and an unstoppable force on Wall Street. A company that was drenched in controversy after controversy. A CEO with ties to the mafia and a decision that left thousands of passengers stranded on an island. And some even dead. But how did it all start? Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's a sunny summer day in 1992. A man named Fatasi Jones is out in the park with his son, Billy, testing out his new model aircraft. His son, who is only 10 years old, is controlling an RC aircraft, but he's not using his hands. His son had dreams, big dreams, of one day becoming a pilot. But those dreams were shattered when a drunk driver slammed his car into Mr. Jones' vehicle, leaving his son paralyzed from the neck down. Like a good father, Mr. Jones was not ready to give up on his child, and having a shared hobby and mass enthusiasm for aircraft, he took to his garage and a nearby public library to design an aircraft that could be piloted by solely the human mind. Through trial and error, he inched his way closer to his dream. Testing out this technology became a regular occurrence for Mr. Jones and his son, Billy. And while testing the technology out, as luck would have it, an investor spotted the device on his son, Billy. Taking notice of the incredible potential for such a technology, which had applications that were not just limited to RC airplanes, but one that could be used in real aircraft, both commercial and military. Funding was quickly arranged for Mr. Jones and his new technology, giving birth to a new corporation, Untitled Airlines. As work began to commercialize the technology, word quickly spread and soon reached the ears of a United States military general, General Nicholas Patterson. Patterson was blown away by the potential of unmanned aircraft for use in the military. At the time, it was an idea so groundbreaking that it seemed straight out of the future. Patterson quickly convinced the military to order 10,000 units that could be attached to existing aircraft, and contracted an additional 5,000 military-grade planes to be built by Untitled Airlines. The overall budget granted to the company was in excess of $30 billion. It was no small amount, and rightfully drew criticism from House Democrats. Representative Ronald Jefferson from Ohio stated that it was the perfect reason why the military budget should be cut. With the news circulating about the new contract, the other airlines in the country quickly began developing their own mind-controlled planes in hopes of starting a bidding war for the military contract. Untitled Airlines was not too fond of this and began seeking legal action. After all, the technology was the company's lifeline, and competition could be bad news, especially for investors. The court battles lasted years. Some referred to the period as the World War II of patent and intellectual property wars. The battles lasted from 1994 to 1996. When the dust settled, Untitled Airlines was victorious. The other airlines would not be allowed to bring this technology to market for another 10 years. This gave Untitled Airlines the advantage it needed. Stock prices reached a record high for Untitled Airlines. But while the stock prices were flying high, the planes that Untitled Airlines was developing were not. It had been 5 years since Mr. Jones created Untitled Airlines, and yet not a single commercial flight had been flown by the company. Aware of the optics and the recent end to the court battles, Mr. Jones knew he was on borrowed time, and commercial flights would have to begin soon. But there was one problem. The mind control technology on such a large scale was not quite ready. With the planes being mind controlled, pilots no longer needed to be aboard the physical plane to complete a flight. This could be done remotely from thousands of miles away. Having a bigger labor pool would allow Untitled Airlines to offer flights for a fraction of the cost of other airlines. Because digital communication was in its infancy, the remote control technology was riddled with connection problems, sometimes causing pilots to lose sight of the plane, and other times causing planes to go missing. As a stopgap solution, Mr. Jones ordered all planes to be loaded with an ALU, automatic landing unit. In case a pilot ever lost contact with a plane, this unit would safely land the plane automatically at the nearest airport. Additionally, pilot staffing had become an issue within the United States. There just weren't enough pilots to fly the thousands of commercial flights that were slated to start in the spring of 1997 for Untitled Airlines. Marketing for Untitled Airlines had already begun booking flights ahead of the schedule, and many passengers were excited to fly on the new 747 X-3s, which were Boeing's answer to the Concorde and could fly at above Mach 3 speeds. These planes were only manufactured for Untitled Airlines and contained the MCUs on board, the mind controller units. Several public test flights had been completed prior to the scheduled commercial launch. The success of these flights only increased consumer interest. Needless to say, the hype was there, but the pilots were not. To combat the pilot shortage, Jones saw an opportunity to use overseas labor. He took to the Philippines and contracted 500 pilots to help mind control the new planes. With the staffing issues resolved and spring quickly approaching, Mr. Jones felt good about the prospects of Untitled Airlines. He was also excited for his son, now named Edward. His son had been training to fly planes using the mind control units for the prior 5 years and was slated to fly the first Untitled Airlines commercial flight. Being only 18 years old, he would be the youngest pilot to ever fly a commercial flight. This would be a dream come true for both father and son. It was 3:46 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. Mr. Jones received a phone call that no father desires. His son, Edward, was struck by another drunk driver on his way home from pilot training. This time, he did not survive. To make matters worse, it appeared to have been the same driver that had caused the first accident. Mr. Jones was mortified. His dreams had been snatched from underneath him. With a tragedy on his hands, Mr. Jones decided to take an indefinite leave of absence. The first commercial flight for Untitled Airlines was flown in the spring of 1997 on April 13th, from New Mexico to New York. The flight was a massive success, reaching its destination in only 1 hour. in 30 minutes, which was twice as fast as other similar flights. But the success would be short-lived. As more commercial flights became available, the problems that were swept under the rug began surfacing. 1 month later, a disaster was nearly averted when an Untitled Airlines pilot lost contact with one of the planes. The passengers on board Flight 1487 from Japan to Malaysia were on a routine flight when the ALU light came on, the Automatic Landing Unit. A flight attendant informed the passengers of the emergency. They would soon be landing in North Korea. That's it for part 1. The story continues in part 2.